Could Cayden Lindstrom be the perfect fit for the Sharks if they don't land Macklin Celebrini?
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, contributor at San Jose Hockey Now. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. Probably part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. And if you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is just follow wherever you get podcasts, or you can watch this on YouTube as well. And today we're joined by Hadi Kalakeche of Dobber Prospects / one half of the Locked On NHL Prospects to talk about Cayden Lindstrom and why he would be a perfect fit for what the Sharks are building in their forward department if they don't land Macklin Celebrini. So we're going to talk about Lundstrom and kind of what he brings to the table, where how he would fit with the slipperiest of Pete's William Eklund, and just, again, why maybe if you don't get Celebrini, Lindstrom could be the guy to kind of target in the top 5 picks. So before we get into all that, I do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. And now we bring in good friend of the show, Hadi Kalakeche of Locked On NHL Prospects. Hadi, how's it going, buddy?
Doing very, very good. Logging in on a bunch of viewings, rankings coming up soon. It's the whole thing. Keeping busy. How about you?
We are heading towards the trade deadline, so that the actual fun part of the season for the Sharks is who's not going to be here, and then draft. That's the only fun part of the Sharks right now is who's not going to be here, when are we going to get, and when is the draft going to be here. So we're going to be talking about a guy today, Cayden Lindstrom. Maybe he might be your long loss. Cayden Lindstrom, who is a hashtag big boy. So Cayden Lindstrom, 6'4", 215-pound forward playing for Medicine Hat in the WHL. This year he has 32 games, 27 goals, 19 assists, 117 shots on goal. Has been out recently because of a broken hand. I think he's supposed to start kind of ramping up in here pretty soon to be back. But as I ask everyone, Hadi, what makes Cayden Lindstrom such an intriguing prospect?
It's the combination of size, awareness, and skill. I mean, usually big guys like Cayden Lindstrom, he's listed at 6'4", 216 right now. Guys like this usually don't have much adaptive skill because they're just able to overpower all their competition. They don't really need to develop perfect, board battle technique or think the game at an advanced level. They can just outmuscle their opposition and make it work. But what's really interesting with Cayden Lindstrom is he's an incredibly aware guy. He spots his teammates early. He identifies back pressure really well, keeps a mental map of his surroundings. His decision-making in transition's great. On top of all that, he has a real, above average NHL tool already, which is its ability to catch pucks. It seems like the puck just glues to his stick. I've seen him collect stretch passes from behind his back off the boards, and they just glue to his stick, and he just keeps going. Like, he doesn't need to slow down to corral pucks. Just a very translatable game on top of having some really interesting puck skills. Like, he's a good handler. He's a good shooter. He's a good passer. Nothing overwhelming on that side. But what elevates everything in his game is the awareness. It elevates his board battle game. It elevates his ability to score goals, to find teammates in transition, off passes. So just overall, there's chess in this game, which you don't usually see with guys this big. So when I say that Cayden Lindstrom's a big guy who doesn't play like a stereotypical big guy, that's kind of what I'm referring. And actually, when we talk about what we usually expect from big guys is net drives, big hits, overpowering players. Like, Lindstrom can do that, but he also has a very intricate understanding of how hockey develops in transition and in the offensive zone, which makes him really, really alluring.
Yeah, I watched one of his games. Again, I'm just an idiot with the microphone. I was blown away. I was super impressed with him. Just his ability, especially you kind of mentioned the puck handling. Also doing that in tight spaces. Like he lives like in the high, at least in the game I watch, he lives in that high danger zone, right? On the power play, he is the net front presence. He kind of like lives in that high danger, and his ability to, like you said, collect pucks and try to make the most of them. You can see where that's a very translatable skill, right? Like it doesn't matter if you can kind of do that now, you're probably going to be able to continue to do that as you face stiffer and tougher competition. So Lindstrom, he's kind of ranked, he's been kind of a riser, right? I think a lot of people, you have him at fifth right now. I know he's been kind of climbing up. Is he a guy that we could be potentially talking about as we continue this process so with no clear cut number two, like as the number 2 pick in the draft, if he comes back from his injury and just burns the house down?
It would take a lot for him to dethrone Ivan Demidov for me as second overall. Demidov is just,
he's really good too.
Yeah, it's like with Demidov, it's like he's the only player in the entire draft this year that has a 10 ranking in our ranking system at Dalbert Prospects, and that's a stick handling ability. He's the only player in this draft that reminds me even slightly. He's the only player I've scouted really that reminds me even slightly of Pavel Datsyuk. So that's, for me, it's a different quality of player with Demidov. He has game breaking ability, game breaking upside. With Lundstrom, what makes him really interesting is that he has a safe floor. He's for me, there's no real scenario that I can see in which Cayden Lindstrom becomes anything less than a second line center. He also he's pretty raw in terms of his overall usage of his physical tools. He likes to throw hits, but he's still learning the puck protection game. It can get even better, which is ridiculous. So for me, I still think there's top line upside, which definitely puts him in the top 5 range for me. I like Ivan Demidov too much to have anyone else than Celebrini ahead of him. But still, I don't think Cayden Lindstrom's going to last long on draft day. He's exactly what teams look for.
I mean, who doesn't want a 6'4", 215-pound, 18-year-old center who, is just that's unless you're a 6'7" right-handed defenseman, those are like the two things every GM looks for right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, we talk about kind of what Lindstrom, is and like kind of what makes him special. What do you think is maybe the one thing that kind of holds him back as he continues his development path?
I would say in terms of Lindstrom's development path, what I would expect him to need to develop in order to kind of solidify his NHL efficiency would probably be some edge work. He's a player who a lot of his intelligence comes off of his anticipation. A lot of his goals come off of anticipation, and he has like 3-faceted anticipation. So you can anticipate where the puck goes, where your opponents are, and where your teammates are, and he has all 3 down pat. But I feel like that's an adaptive skill he's had to develop because he's a player who can accelerate fairly well and has a decent top speed. But when it comes to cutting turns tightly, or especially the 3-foot acceleration, it takes him 5, 6, 7 steps to hit his top speed. So that's one thing that I could see him develop. But even then, I don't see it as something that necessarily limits his game. It would just be a plus. Defensively, he's fairly good. He's nothing overwhelming. He can obviously get better at that, but he's good enough that he's making plays in his own zone and turning pucks over for his teammates to pick up, that kind of stuff. And yeah, just a very mature game. So I would say maybe edge work, maybe defensive game, but neither should really prevent him from making the NHL.
Yeah, I mean, those skating is something that you're going to continue to work on your entire career. Yeah. And defense, like you don't very rarely do you see these 17 18-year-old kids who are wonder kids, and that's when you go to the AHL. That's kind of where you develop that defensive game and round it out before you head into the NHL. So all right, guys, before we continue with Hadi, we kind of talk about Lindstrom's fit with the Sharks, and then we're going to talk to Hadi about his thoughts on the 2024 draft. Just need to take a quick break. It's almost the halfway point of the season, or it's past the halfway point of the season, Sharks fans. I know this season has been brutal. Regardless of where we're in the current standings, I want to remind you that you could still win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number 1 choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. all you have to do is pick some of your favorite players, whether they're NHL superstars like McDavid, Crosby, or McKinnon, or some of your favorite Sharks like Fabian Zetterlund, Tomas Hertl, or Slippery Pete himself, and record more or less in their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. To put 100 times bet on sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Sharks fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL. You get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. If the Sharks were to, not get Celebrini and then draft, if they're second, third, whatever, and they draft Lundstrom, where would he fit in the Sharks pipeline? I think it'd be a very interesting discussion between Will Smith, who was picked 4 overall last year in a much better draft, and Cayden Lindstrom, who would be, 2, 3, 4 this year, and a little bit weaker draft, but I feel like maybe is a little bit more well-rounded player than Smith.
Yeah, I would say for Cayden Lindstrom, what makes him really interesting is just the way that that his skill set matches up really, really well with what William Eklund's good at. Those two would.
We're trying to find William Eklund more friends, right?
Exactly. Exactly. He needs a buddy. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think Lindstrom's skill set just works really, really well with what William Eklund does. Eklund is a really slippery, really elusive player who loves to play between checks to find space to make plays, and especially in transitions, I often see William Eklund slip in a position where he can hop on a rebound. And what Cayden Lindstrom's so good at doing is corralling pucks in transition, driving them to the net, getting his knee out, getting his shoulder down, and driving the net and creating rebounds. On top of that, Eklund's a really good kind of small area playmaker, and Lindstrom's really good at finding small areas. So both the playmaking abilities of Eklund match really well with the off-puck movement and goal-scoring touch that Lindstrom has, but also Lindstrom's habits fit really well with what Eklund's habits are in transition. So that's a combo on a line that I could see work really well, whether it's Lindstrom at center and Eklund on wing or the opposite. I'm not too sure yet. And I don't know how good of an idea it is to have a Lindstrom, Smith, Eklund line, because then who plays center, right? But overall, I think that, that combination of skills between Lindstrom and Eklund, I would see those two become a really good dynamic duo, a 1-2 punch that can work really well. And if you can have Smith at second center, I mean, that's about as good as a second line center you can get.
So Smith overall, and Musty together, and Musty just does the Ryan Leonard role, and you're good to go.
Absolutely.
That's all you need. So kind of talking about the Sharks groups, the Sharks, I mean, I know Musty's a little bit bigger guy, but Sharks have a little bit smaller, forwards. Like Will Smith is 6 foot, I think 180 pounds. Eklund's, 5'10", 5'11". Borlo, Gush, and some of these guys are a little bit smaller. Having a guy like Cayden Lindstrom, who would kind of be a giant amongst children there when it comes to like height. I know, again, size and everything, but it is nice to have some diversity among your forwards, right? So what would Lindstrom kind of bring to the Sharks prospect pool in that at least in that area, right?
For sure. That linear element to Lindstrom's game would be really welcome among that group. He's definitely creative, but he's got the elements in his game to just drive the net and bring someone with him and create chaos and wreak havoc. He's also really good at forechecking, at taking pucks off the boards, making plays, taking contested pucks and turning them into lengthy possessions is something that Lindstrom does really well. And if you can combine that with the tools of an Eklund, of a Bordeleau, of a Gushchin, of a Will Smith, and all that bunch, even Quentin Musty I put in that category, I think it gives you a good balance. We can even throw Philip Bistad in that group. Like these are, I think that the Sharks have done a really good job of combining small skilled players with big skilled players, and finding a balance there that works really well for their forward core. Because among those 7 or 8 that I mentioned, like you're starting to develop a really cohesive top 9, a really, a top 9 that gels well together, that works well together. If you can have 1 or 2 big guys per line, I mean, that's a great start. Whether it's Lindstrom on the first, Musty on the second, Bistad on the third, or maybe 2 of them on the second, that kind of thing. Regardless, I think that overall it gives you a lot of options and a lot of versatility on each line. You don't have to play one particular style. It opens up different avenues for each line to play different ways in order to benefit the circumstances of the game as much as possible. And it also depends on who you're facing. If you're facing a team that's really rush heavy, you can slow down the pace of play by creating long offensive possessions. If you're playing against a team that really works well on the forecheck, you can have one of your big centers play down low, support the defense. So just there's a lot of options when you have versatility in your offensive core, and adding Lindstrom to this group, I feel would just be a really, really good fit for San Jose.
Lundstrom, I was kind of reading, some early scouting reports, and someone said he kind of had a little bit of Kachuk to his game, where he's got a little bit of that kind of snarl and nastiness, and that seems like Mike Grier catnip right there. So, we kind of talk about if you like that kind of old school. It sounds like he's kind of like a little bit of an old school power forward, but also that mentality of kind of, I'm not an idiot, like kind of the old school power forwards are. So, it sounds like if Celebrini is not there for the Sharks, this might be the way Mike Grier goes, right?
I wouldn't be surprised at all. I would say, though, the defense is also kind of a question mark in San Jose. So I don't blame them at all if they go for a defenseman, and there are a lot to talk about in this draft. But among forwards, I have a hard time finding you a better fit for the San Jose Sharks and Cayden Lindstrom. He's just, the way that he plays is so lovable. And like you said, he's got a bit of that snarl, that nastiness to his game. I call it the whatever it takes factor. He'll do whatever it takes to win the game. If he feels like getting under your skin is gonna give you his team an opportunity to win, he'll do it. But if he feels like taking a penalty in that moment or going down 4-on-4 for coincidental roughing minors would actually harm his team, because the other team has a lot of speedy, open ice players, then he'll hold back. He's not necessarily a get under your skin at all cost players. He's a win at all cost players, and that to me is just it's exactly what San Jose could use. And Cayden Lindstrom's exactly the type of player to turn borderline contender into a true contender. Like, he's got that factor to his game where he steps up in big moments, scores big goals, does all the right things off the puck, has the right habits, and is just incredibly intelligent, which again is not something I'm used to seeing from a player this size. So it's really impressive.
Okay, so let's talk about kind of his timeline here. Of course, he's going to be in the the WHL for a couple years, probably a year, especially with the way the Sharks are bid with their prospects. Probably a year in the AHL, and then making his impact. So we're probably looking at about 3 years before he's kind of an everyday NHL player.
Yeah. I'd say, well, it depends. I think that Cayden Lindstrom, especially if he adds some more kind of pop to his edge work, could almost make the NHL after this summer. If not this summer, maybe the year after. Like, he's fairly, the way that he plays is fairly translatable. I don't think the issue will be whether or not he can play in the NHL next year or the year after. I just think it might be better to give him a longer run, or maybe some time in the HL, just simply because it's going to help him. It's going to help him get up to speed and get used to his tools and how they work against pro competition. If you can play him, if you're comfortable playing him on a third line or even a second line next year, because your team isn't that deep and you're looking for someone to play next to your players, Cayden Lindstrom can easily fit that bill. I'm just thinking, if we were talking about a deep forward core in San Jose, then it's probably
they are not that.
Yeah. So, there aren't many players I can name you in San Jose's lineup that I think would take time away from Lindstrom, but it really depends on how your coach tends to play young players. I mean, I don't know if this year the Sharks have been more comfortable with using Eklund in a bona fide top six role, that kind of thing. So it depends on a lot of factors, but I say as long as you're able to get a middle six ice time, you're getting a decent NHL out of Lindstrom really, really soon.
I mean, to that point with Quinn, I think you have seen a bit of a learning moment from him, especially from his time with the Rangers, where he's been more like Eklund has played a ton, right? And played top 6 minutes. And then he noticed like Eklund's been struggling. So he put Eklund on the third line. And guess what? Eklund scored that game. And, you saw like, oh, okay, like David Quinn might, maybe he's learned from his mistakes with the Rangers. And it seems like his and again, the Sharks are one of the worst teams in the NHL. So you have nothing left to lose here. But, I think you have seen that. And the guy I kind of, if Lindstrom were to kind of play, like I would actually put him with Couture, because I think having a like veteran guy like Couture, if Mikael Granlund's, a lot of ifs here, if Mikael Granlund's still around as your second line center, and then Logan Couture's your third line center, like having a veteran guy like that, I think that would be the perfect guy for Lindstrom to kind of learn from as he gets adapted to the NHL. So if the Sharks don't get Celebrini, I'm all aboard the Lindstrom trade. I think you, like you said, I think it's a perfect match of what the Sharks need going forward. And then if you have a Smith Lindstrom Beasted, you have a chance like against what the Ducks are cooking down there, because that center depth down in Anaheim, that's what worries me. That's what I'm building towards here for the next couple of seasons, because those guys are going to be insanely good here really soon. So we'll talk about Lindstrom here more in a second. All right, before we finish up with Hadi, we're going to talk about what he thinks about the 2024 draft, talk about some of the defensemen and what they could be potentially be available for San Jose. Just need to take a quick break. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just keep betting Steph Curry to do awesome Steph Curry things, because Steph Curry is awesome. And there's nothing better than rooting for your favorite players doing awesome things. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sports partner of the NBA. But let's get to your personal 2024 rankings. I know I had you and Sebastian on to kind of talk about the 2024. We talked to some about the draft and such. But you have put out your kind of post World Juniors rankings. This is end of January. You have Celebrini number 1. It's Celebrini's world, right? And we're all living in it. And you also mentioned Demidov as number 2. But it feels like this draft, there's so many questions. My youngest is throwing away trash right now. So many questions on who's after Celebrini? I see you have a very interesting name at number 3. So Zane Pareka, defend your case.
Oh yeah, Zane Parek is, he's the only defenseman in this class that has point per game upside. He's just so poised, so calm, so aware, and so dynamic offensively. Just when he gets the puck in the defensive zone, he's getting on a teammate's stick and control. Like the puck, he doesn't create uncontrolled puck sequences for nothing. If he dumps out a puck, it's really because it was the only option. He was pressed from 3 sides and had to get rid of the puck. Otherwise, controlled pass, game after game after game. On top of that, booming shot from the point, really soft hands, great skating ability, and an awareness and anticipation of his teammates' routes that, for me, as much as Yves Bouillam's been fantastic to watch with Denver in the NCAA this year, I'm much more confident with Parek's offensive projection. And I'm about equally as confident with both of them's defensive projection. I think Zane Parek's defensive concerns have been way overblown. There's some habits to polish, but outside of that, he controls gaps really well. He boxes out the net front when he needs to. He doesn't rush into corners to get involved in puck battles that he doesn't need to. He's comfortable sitting back and kind of identifying play and seeing what the next option is. Overall, I just think that Zane Parek has he has about average defensive ability and game-breaking offensive ability. And I've always loved this style of defenseman, heading back to Quinn Hughes, heading back to Luke Hughes, Rasmus Dahlin. I mean, I remember having Quinn Hughes in my top 2 in his draft year and being called crazy for it. But I mean, it's been working out great, right? So I'm getting more and more confident with this type of player, and there's obviously concerns because in the past, we've had first rounders that were offensive dynamos, the Ryan Merkleys and the Ryan Merkleys and the Eric Brandstroms and those styles of players, and people are concerned. But Zane Parekh is Zane Parekh. He's none of these guys. He has tools and abilities that not only outshine the players that I'm mentioning as comparisons at the same age, but he also has other tools that they had as weaknesses that he has as about average tools or maybe even strengths. For example, poise under pressure. He's not a player who panics. His panic threshold is sky high. Whereas Ryan Merkley, that was the main thing with him. As soon as you pressure him, he finds a way to get rid of the puck or tries to do too much or etc. Zane Parekh has hit that balance extremely well, and there's a reason why I have him third overall. It's because I truly believe that there's a path to the NHL and then room to grow into a bona fide top pair defenseman, which outside of Bouillon, maybe Dickinson, maybe Levshunov, I don't really see a bona fide top pair upside apart from Parekh in this draft.
You mentioned some of the defensemen here, and kind of mentioned the Sharks having the Penguins pick, which is kind of right now floating around the that 16. Hopefully the Penguins continue to be terrible, and this fits in like maybe right outside the top 10. But if you're a team that needs a number one defenseman, I know this draft is heavy with defensemen, but you mentioned a couple guys who are kind of floating around with names here, but it feels like you could still get take a swing on a defenseman with a mid-round pick and probably be pretty happy with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are definitely some options in here. In terms of defensemen, I'm fairly certain that Anton Silayev and Artyom Levshunov are going to be the first 2 off the board.
One's very tall.
Yeah, Silayev is massive. It's ridiculous. And like a player this big should not be skating that well. It doesn't make sense. Yeah. But Silayev, Levshunov, Dickinson, probably the first 3 off the board. I'd be surprised if Zeev Bouillon lasts for long. The great World Juniors that he had are probably going to be putting him up these boards. Yep. But Parekh has been a bit all over the place. I've seen him in the 15 to 20 range on some rankings, so that falls well within what Pittsburgh's pick would be. So if you're picking, 12 to 17 and Parekh's available, I would jump on that occasion. And if you can come out of this draft, if the San Jose Sharks can come out of this draft with Cayden Lindstrom and Zane Parekh as their 2 first picks of the draft, that's already a win on its own. Like that's just absurd.
And that doesn't even include their own second round pick, which is going to be very high. And then you have a Devils pick. If they don't go to the Eastern Conference, it's probably going to be a top 50 pick as well. So yeah, with the Sharks having 4 top 50 picks in this draft, Mike Grier is set up to do some work here. So one last question before we kind of get to our blood questions. So one guy I always kind of ask is Adam Yurch, who I know he's out for the rest of the year.
Yep.
And I know he's not as good as his brother David, who's having some issues right now. But I don't know why I'm fascinated by him, and I would be if that Penguins pick, if some of the other guys aren't there, I'd be willing to take a swing. Am I crazy?
Not necessarily. I have him ranked 14th overall, and if Parekh's gone, and the defenseman I mentioned is gone, like he's next in line for me. Like after the way I have him ordered, the defenseman is Parekh, Bouillon, Dickinson, Levshunov, then it's Anton Silayev, and then he's the 6th on the list. And there's a possibility that all 5 of the first defensemen that I mentioned are gone by then. At which point I think it's well worth it. He's 6'1", 155-ish pounds. But he plays so violent, and that combination with the fact that he has weight to add, he has room to grow, he can be a really good 2-way defenseman because I really like his breakout ability as well. He's really good at spinning off pressure and finding a pass outlet. He plays small give and goes out of his zone that put him in situations where he can just skate the puck in. He's got some intelligence, some awareness to his game. He's just fairly panicky at the moment. And I think that can come with time, but the tools are there. He's a good skater. He's a good stick handler. He's a good passer, and again, has an aggressive mindset, which rivals his brother. I just think that David Jiricek is a lot more toolsy than Adam Jiricek, but Adam Jiricek has more intricacy and chess to his game than David Jiricek. I'd say Adam Jiricek is less raw mentally. David Jiricek, Adam Jiricek is less raw mentally. David Jiricek is less raw physically. So that's the difference between them. He's definitely worth a bet in the top 15 for me. If you can get a pick and the first 5 defensemen I mentioned are gone, absolutely go for it.
All right, we'll get to the blood questions. Number 1, I'm going to exclude Celebrini. I'm going to exclude Celebrini. 5 years from now, we're looking back at the draft. Who's the best player in this draft?
Ivan Demidov. I think he has 100-point upside if he works out well. 5 years might be a bit too early. I'd say 10 years from now, it'll be clear cut if they all work out the way I think they can. But yeah, Ivan Demidov.
All right. And then I know we're recording this February 10th, so we still have a little time before the draft, but it's going to be written in blood. What pick does what pick does Cayden Lindstrom go in the draft?
Ooh, tough one. I'd have to check the order. I don't have it right now off the top of my head. No, I can't. Okay. 4th overall. I'll say 4th overall.
4th overall. Congratulations, Columbus. You just drafted. So as of right now, because the draft's going to change, but 4th overall makes a lot of sense. And man, if you had Fantilli and then Lindstrom as your 1-2.
Oh my goodness.
Pretty fun.
That would not be fair.
that's pretty fun. So, Hadi, you've said it all. Where can the people find you, buddy?
Yeah, the one-stop shop is Twitter. If you're watching on YouTube, it's right under my face. Hadi K_scouting. Everything I post goes there: rankings, articles, podcast episodes, all that. Make sure to follow also Locked On NHL Prospects. Wherever you're watching this, you can watch that podcast. So make sure to check it out.
Yeah, you and Sebastian do a great job. I won't tell you which ones of you guys is my favorite. You two can try to fight amongst yourselves to figure that out. So, no, you guys are both great. You guys do a great job. I know a lot of Sharks fans have definitely found your podcast because we have nothing better to cheer for than slip repeat and then draft picks. So, but thanks again, Hadi. Of course, you can find Locked On Sharks wherever you get podcasts and watch on YouTube as well. Follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. And you can find me on Twitter at my fry hole. Until next time, friends.